In September of 2004, Wizard Magazine had an article listing what they considered to be essential reading for Marvel Comics fans. And amongst expected stories like X-Men's Dark Phoenix Saga, Iron Man's Demon in a Bottle, and Daredevil's Born Again was an Avengers story called Under Siege.
Now granted, I should take anything listed by Wizard, aka the El Duce of comics journalism, with a grain of salt, but the summary of the storyline did intrigue me for a while afterwards.
So, is Under Siege worth the read? Let's find out.
At Avengers Mansion, team servant Edwin Jarvis watches some TV news coverage of a mass protest taking place outside the building, in reaction to the super team's decision to admit the ever-polarizing Namor the Submariner as a member. It's at this point that the team arrives. This current incarnation of the Avengers is being led by Janet Van Dyne, aka the Wasp. The rest of the team consists of Captain America, the aforementioned Namor, Hercules, the Black Knight, and Captain Marvel.
There have been quite a few Marvel comic book characters to wear the mantle of Captain Marvel. This one was named Monica Rambeau. She was a Harbor Patrol agent in New Orleans who was exposed to extra-dimensional energy in an accident. This resulted in her being able to alter her body into any form of energy. Later, she would renounce the title of Captain Marvel and be known as Photon. And then she would be known as Pulsar. And then she would be known as Spectrum. Now, the Black Knight is named Dane Whitman. He's a descendant of two previous Black Knights, Sir Percy of Scandia and Nathan Garrett. And Whitman wields a device called the Ebony Blade, which is a sword carved from a meteorite by the wizard Merlin that can channel various forms of energy. And as for Hercules, well, he's Hercules. Not much more to go on that.
Jarvis informs the group about the protesters outside the mansion, much to the Wasp's chagrin.
Man, I really wish I could make a Married with Children joke right now. Stupid YouTube copyright.
Back outside, the newspeople interview a woman claiming to be the widow of a dock worker killed during an attack by Namor and the Atlanteans a few years prior. However, it turns out that the widow is really the recently escaped supervillain, Moonstone.
Moonstone was once Carla Soffin, a criminal psychologist who came into possession of a gem that belonged to an original villain named Moonstone. She has typical powers, some psychic ability, flight, energy blasts.
The protesters begin to riot when the Avengers appear in order to quell them. Moonstone utilizes this to attempt an escape. It's then that the Wasp informs the rest of the Avengers about Moonstone's escape from prison. In a last-ditch attempt to provide cover, Moonstone takes out a nearby fire hydrant. Captain Marvel repairs the damaged hydrant too quickly, though, so Moonstone takes out a nearby FBI chopper. As Namor and Captain Marvel take off to help the chopper, the Wasp manages to track down the source of the beam fired at it and confronts Moonstone. The Wasp pursues Moonstone into the sewers, where she is temporarily blinded after one of Moonstone's blasts. Back on the surface, Moonstone blasts her way through to the street as he tries to make her ascent. Black Knight goes looking for Wasp, only to find Moonstone. He blocks her attack with his sword, which he then channels the energy through and throws back at her. This is when the Wasp returns, explaining that she prevented a much larger explosion by shutting off a gas valve. After viewing Namor's act of bravery, the protesters disperse and Moonstone is loaded into a police van. However, it turns out the police aren't really police. They are in fact Crusher Creel, aka the Absorbing Man, and his wife, Titania. The two are both in the employ of someone who is in need of Moonstone and her particular talents. Back at the mansion, Namor receives a visit from his cousin Byra. Byra informs Namor that Atlantis has been taken over by the warlord Attuma, who has taken Namor's girlfriend, Marina, hostage. Namor immediately leaves the mansion to take on Attuma and his forces, much to the Wasp's chagrin. Meanwhile, Jan is also having to deal with Hercules, as he refuses to be ordered around by a woman.
Seriously, Jan, what's with the constant Marcy Darcy posing?
Jen then gets a call about a silent alarm at her apartment being set off. Jen flies over to her place only to find Paladin.
Paladin is a mercenary slash private investigator in the Marvel Universe. He sometimes helps heroes, sometimes helps villains, and does serve as an occasional romantic interest for the Wasp.
Jan then gets a call from a nearby prison. She asks Paladin to accompany her, and he agrees. At the prison, it turns out that the Wasp has been called in to help with the interrogation of Yellow Jacket.
No, not that Yellow Jacket. That Yellow Jacket was Hank Pym, the original Ant-Man and Jan's ex-husband. This Yellow Jacket was named Rita Demera, and she was a thief who stole one of Pym's Yellow Jacket costumes for her own personal use. I don't think we'll be revisiting that trope anytime soon.
The interrogation is interrupted by Demera's attorneys, who aren't attorneys at all. They're really the villains, Screaming Mimi and the Grey Gargoyle.
Screaming Mimi was a former professional wrestler who then got hired by the Roxxon Oil Company to perform some corporate espionage. To help her along the way, they gave her an apparatus that gave her the ability to emit a sonic scream that could sometimes cause paralysis. The Grey Gargoyle was a scientist who, after an accidental exposure to some chemicals, discovered the ability to turn anything he touched into stone for at least an hour. You may remember me mentioning him in my Fear Itself review, where he really didn't appear at all.
The two evildoers manage to take out Paladin and Wasp and then escape with Yellow Jacket. Back at the mansion, Black Knight is conducting an experiment with Captain Marvel when he receives the Wasp's emergency signal. The Knight is unable to communicate with either Marvel or Hercules because the latter is too busy getting drunk, so it falls on Dane to assist Jan. Meanwhile, Jan manages to catch up with their escapees and take down their getaway car. While Mimi and Gargoyle take on the Wasp, Yellow Jacket receives a call from inside the car. The person tells her to just flee the scene. She does, right at the point that Paladin, Knight, and Marvel show up to take down Gargoyle and Mimi. Several days later, Knight fills Captain America in on the search for Yellow Jacket when they are interrupted by a stress call from Namor. When the team reaches the outskirts of Atlantis, Namor fills them in on the situation. He's been unable to overthrow Atuma, and he still has his fiancée, Alpha Flight team member Marina, hostage.
Alpha Flight is a superhero team funded by the Canadian government. That's really all you need to know for this.
The Avengers and Alpha Flight team up to lead an assault on Atlantis and save Marina. Unfortunately, it turns out she's been disfigured by love.
Yeah, I don't get what's going on with Marina either. Basically, this whole issue just served one purpose: getting the Submariner to take a leave of absence from the team so he doesn't have to appear in the rest of the story.
Back in New York City, Hercules is once again at the bar engaging in merriment and booze when he befriends a stranger. That is until the stranger mentions the Wasp and Herc throws him through the window. Except it turns out the stranger is actually in the league with Yellow Jacket, and he is the Wrecker.
Now, the Wrecker was a career criminal who wound up getting Norse powers bestowed upon him somehow, and then wound up splitting those powers off to a few of his friends, creating a team known as the Wrecking Crew.
Wrecker and Yellow Jacket radio back to Moonstone, who states that the Baron will be pleased. Who is the Baron, you ask? None other than Baron Helmut Zemo.
For more information on Baron Zemo, please see my Fear Itself review.
Zemo dispatches Moonstone to the project he assigned her to, working with the supervillain known as Blackout.
Blackout is Marcus Daniels, a former lab assistant who was bathed in energy from an antimatter dimension known as the Dark Force. Somehow, this allowed him to control said dimension and use its powers for various means.
Moonstone has been working on a way to control Blackout's mind. Well, for her to control Blackout's mind. Her demonstration gets interrupted when a fight breaks out between Wrecking Crew member Piledriver and Mr. Hyde.
Mr. Hyde is the alter ego of Dr. Calvin Szabo, a rogue biochemist who was greatly influenced by the work of Robert Louis Stevenson. And yes, he is Sky's father on Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Zemo and Moonstone break up the skirmish, and then Zemo calls the rest of the Masters of Evil together.
The Masters of Evil first appeared in Avengers number 6 and have appeared in subsequent incarnations ever since. This iteration includes the aforementioned Baron Zemo, Moonstone, Yellow Jacket, Mr. Hyde, Absorbing Man, Titania, and the Wrecking Crew, and they're joined by longtime Iron Man foe, the Fixer, Whirlwind, a mutant who has a romantic obsession with the Wasp, Goliath, a former mercenary turned size-changing supervillain, and Tiger Shark, a former Olympic swimmer genetically engineered with adamantium teeth.
Later that day, while Jarvis is on break and the other Avengers are occupied, the Masters strike. The group takes Jarvis hostage and begins laying in wait for the next Avenger. The Black Knight is the first to return. The Yellow Jacket draws him off, and then Hyde jumps him. After the Knight is rendered unconscious, Zemo takes possession of the Ebony Blade. Back in New Orleans, Monica Rambeau is sitting down to breakfast when she receives the emergency call. She arrives to find Jarvis and the Black Knight bound and gagged. This is when Moonstone directs Blackout to unleash the Dark Force dimension. Captain Marvel tries to phase out of the dimension, but it's too late. The dimension closes around her, and then she disappears. We now interrupt this attempted massacre for some fan service as we visit the Wasp as she relaxes near her swimming pool. She's interrupted by Captain America, who informs her about a tough battle he had with Whirlwind and the Trapster. When he tried to reach the other Avengers, he got no response.
Yeah, the confrontation between Captain America and Whirlwind happened in Cap's solo title. I should also point out that there was a Spider-Man tie-in issue to this storyline as well, but neither of these two issues are included in this trade collection.
Realizing there's something wrong, Cap and Wasp head back to the mansion. Meanwhile, at the mansion, the Masters begin making their way through the living quarters, unaware that the Wasp is spying on them. Jan makes her way through the mansion's ventilation system and comes across Jarvis and the Black Knight. Jarvis fills her in on the situation. It's then that Hercules returns to the mansion completely schnocked due to his lady friend drugging him. She's in Zemo's employ. Cap and the Wasp are able to temporarily direct the demigod away from the mansion, but the stubborn deity decides to try entering the building through the back. It's here that Tiger Shark jumps him and the two fight. Cap and Wasp try to enter the mansion, only to get stopped by the building's security system. Captain America then gets incapacitated and dragged inside. Then Blackout covers the mansion in the Dark Force dimension. Meanwhile, Hercules continues fighting Tiger Shark when Hyde enters the fray. The Wrecking Crew also join in and all begin mercilessly beating Hercules. Just when Hercules begins to rally, Goliath shows up and begins whipping the hero around like a ragdoll. The group are then joined by Zemo as they turn their attention to Captain America. Cap says that the Avengers will never give up as long as one of them still lives. Zemo points out that the Wasp is the only Avenger left, and she can't break through the Dark Force shield. Outside, the Dark Force spits out the broken and bloodied body of Hercules. Hercules is taken to a nearby hospital where doctors begin operating to save his life. Meanwhile, the Masters continue tearing the mansion apart. Back at the hospital, Jan winds up being joined by Ant-Man.
Scott Lang was a former convict turned electronics expert who stole one of Hank Pym's Ant-Man suits in order to help his ailing daughter. And while there are similarities to the aforementioned Yellow Jacket, the difference is at least Scott Lang was doing it for a bit more of a noble purpose. Rita DiMera was doing it for her own personal gain. And yes, Scott Lang is the Ant-Man being used in the movie that's coming out in a couple of months.
Ant-Man asks how he can help. The Wasp states that the Avengers may be beyond help. Back at the mansion, the Masters continue torturing Cap and Jarvis. Zemo then dispatches the Absorbing Man and Titania to the hospital to finish off Hercules and the Wasp.
Admittedly, I never really gave a background for Absorbing Man and his longtime love Titania, even though they did play a very small, and I do mean very small, part in the Fear Itself storyline. Well, Absorbing Man is Crusher Creel, a former boxer who turned supervillain after drinking an Asgardian potion that imbued him with the ability to absorb the properties of any material he comes into contact with. And Titania, well, she was once a scrawny little girl who was given superpowers by Dr. Doom after she was inadvertently sucked to the paradimensional battle world during the Marvel Superheroes Secret Wars storyline.
Back at the hospital, Ant-Man continues trying to comfort Jem when the two get the news that Hercules has died. Jen gives up and tells Ant-Man to call in the Fantastic Four to take on the Masters while she enters the operating room to pay her final respects to Hercules. It's then that Herc's pulse returns. Unfortunately, this is also when the Absorbing Man and Titania arrive and begin demolishing the hospital. Back at the mansion, Zemo comes across Captain America's old footlocker and begins destroying the keepsakes inside, such as a photo of Cap and his partner Bucky before Bucky died, and Cap's original shield. Zemo then excuses himself and leaves Cap and Jarvis in the hands of Mr. Hyde. In front of a horrified Captain America, Hyde unleashes his full fury on the unpowered butler. It's at this point that the Black Knight regains consciousness and begins trying to psychically contact the Ebony Blade. Back at the hospital, Ant-Man and Wasp take the fight to the Absorbing Man and Titania. Wasp blinds Creel with one of her stinger bolts, which enables Ant-Man to incapacitate the villain. That is until Creel touches an exposed electrical wire, allowing him to gain the properties of electricity, as Titania breaks into the OR with Hercules. She's stopped by Ant-Man, who commands an army of ants to attack her. Creel then touches some disinfectant in order to clean off his glove, only to get zapped by the Wasp once again. Titania manages to get a hand on the Wasp, but Ant-Man douses the villain with a canister of his size-reducing formula. The two heroes then finish off the Absorbing Man and Titania. Afterwards, Hercules is alive, but comatose. Wasp returns to Avengers Mansion with Ant-Man, and she begins to talk the military into standing down. They will, as long as some more Avengers show up. Ant-Man rigs up some radio equipment, which allows Wasp to contact Sigurd Jarlsson. This was Thor's civilian identity at the time. Meanwhile, Captain Marvel is struggling to escape the Dark Force dimension. She's been repeatedly teased with a light, only to have it lead to nowhere. She makes one last chance at an appearing light, and finds an escape via a hero named Shroud.
Yeah, I have no idea who the Shroud is either.
Elsewhere, an individual has been watching the events at Avengers Mansion unfold on TV. The man suddenly receives a psychic image of the Black Knight, and Dr. Anthony Druid excuses himself to go help the Avengers.
Dr. Anthony Druid is a popular TV psychiatrist who specializes in both hypnotism and the occult. And believe it or not, he actually appeared in 1961 under the name of Dr. Droom. That's D-R-O-O-M, Droom.
Back at the mansion, Captain Marvel and Thor arrive, and the group of Marvel, Wasp, Ant-Man, and Thor prepare for one final assault on the Masters of Evil. Inside, Hyde finishes his near mutilation of Jarvis when the power in the mansion goes out.
Yeah, there seems to be a section missing from this story. I don't know if this was in the original version or if there was just a problem with the file on Comixology, but there's this point where the lights go out in the mansion, and then suddenly Wasp and the remaining Avengers are inside the mansion and working their way towards Jarvis and Cap, and somehow the Black Knight got into possession of the Ebony Blade again. Like I said, I don't know if this was an intentional error or what, but unfortunately this does hamper the story a little bit.
The Black Knight frees Captain America, and they team up to take down Hyde. Wasp and the others arrive immediately to tend to the battered Jarvis. Yellow Jacket witnesses this and reports it to Zemo. The two decide to head to the roof and leave the other Masters to fend for themselves. It's then that Dr. Druid arrives at the mansion and begins sensing Blackout in the Dark Force shield. Druid is able to contact Blackout and convinces him to lower the barrier. Inside the mansion, Ant-Man takes out the Fixer, while Cap and Thor take on the Wrecking Crew and Goliath. The Black Knight tries to join the battle, but is still suffering post-concussion effects. Captain America managed to take down the Wrecking Crew, but struggle with Goliath. Meanwhile, Captain Marvel and Dr. Druid, without each other's knowledge, make their way to the mansion roof to take on Blackout and Moonstone. Moonstone flies off with Marvel in pursuit. Druid focuses attention on freeing Blackout of the mind control Zemo and Moonstone have him under. Captain Marvel and Moonstone square off. Marvel manages to disorient Moonstone to the point that she crashes and fractures her neck, though she is still alive. Back at the mansion, Zemo confronts Dr. Druid and shoots him with his paralytic needler gun. Zemo tries to reconnect his control of Blackout, but Druid aids Blackout in resisting Zemo. Eventually the strain becomes too much for Blackout, who suffers a stroke and dies. Meanwhile, Captain America and Thor fight off Goliath. Cap makes his way to the roof to confront Zemo. Cap tries to explain to Zemo that his father, Heinrich, was killed by a rock slide of his own making, not by Cap and the Avengers. Zemo makes one last lunge at Cap, but Cap shrugs him off, and Zemo stumbles over the edge of the roof and falls to his defeat, though he is still alive. Later, as the Masters of Evil are taken into custody, and Jarvis and the Black Knight are taken to the hospital, Captain America searches through the records and is shaken to find a picture. The picture is of Sarah Rogers, Steve's mother. It's the only one he had of her. Zemo has finally broken Captain America.
So, was Wizard Magazine right? Is Avengers Under Siege essential reading for the Avengers? Well, sort of. I do have some major qualms with this. Namely the fact that the first 3 parts of this story really don't add much. They're set up, and to be honest, the whole Namor issue really doesn't need to be in this. Not to mention they left out the Captain America and Spider-Man issues that tied into this that could have actually added to the storyline a little bit. And other than that, though, this is a really good story. Great characterization, good pacing all the way around, decent artwork. I have no problem giving this storyline a B. And well, that brings us to what we'll be doing next time on the Random Trade Review.